or welcome to FTB Fridays for Friday, the 12th of November, 2021. I'm Jason C. McLean. It's 9:43 a.m. if you want to know when we recorded this in case things change in the world, but nothing much is going to change about the municipal election, which we're going to start with. Welcome, Samantha Gold, my guest. Welcome back.
Hi.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm a little disappointed in the municipal election results.
Okay. Well, that's your take. My take is I'm actually relieved.
Well, let me explain my take. As a disabled Canadian and a citizen of Montreal, I actually feel like not necessarily the bike paths themselves, but the way they were implemented actually worsened access for people with limited mobilities. And I'm not just talking about people like myself who walk with a cane due to chronic conditions. I'm talking about people with walkers, people with strollers, people who just need to be a little bit more careful. I feel like the way, and certainly people who, for example, depend on the accommodations built into the STM buses and, use taxis and other kinds of assisted transportation just to get as close to their homes as humanly possible when they needed to go about. So in my opinion, disability access worsened under Plante. And I don't really feel like Plante's candidates did a good job of, first off, communicating with the disabled community, and second, ever really addressing that and finding a way to balance that with the need to reduce the use of cars in the city.
Well, one thing I noticed about Plante is that she admits that the last 4 years weren't perfect. I think she gave herself a C+ or something like that. And I think that she's definitely, for example, she was originally criticized for after the last election for inclusivity in her party, people of color in her party, and she definitely changed that this time. So she does. She seems to learn. I mean, the reason I'm relieved is because we did not want 4 more years of Denis Coderre, and I think that was.
Well, that's the thing, and that's actually my theory as to the real reason why Plante won and why she won by such a large margin. Because, Coderre was voted out, 4 or 5 years ago now?
Yeah, for good reason.
Yeah, right. Elections are every 4 years. You know better than that, Sammy. Anyway.
It's actually the one election that's actually set.
I think that the real reason for Plante's victory was not necessarily because Plante was the greatest mayor we've ever had. It was more to punish Denis Coderre for running again. For a lot of people, that was considered chutzpah, a way of kind of saying, dude, we voted you out the first time. What are you doing?
Yeah. No, admittedly, if Ensemble de Montréal had run a more competent candidate, things might have been different. But also the thing too, and I actually wrote an article about this, is that I feel that Montreal made a choice, a tectonic shift in politics 4 years ago to get away from the old sort of crony, basically the old system, and we changed the new system. And I'm glad that even though she wasn't perfect, we decided to vote to continue in that direction. And as Plante said, to make the last election 4 years ago not a fluke.
I'm gonna say what you won't. Okay. All right, are necessary. Well, not necessarily, but I feel like old white guys with money, they had their shot to make this city great, and they haven't done a very good job in recent decades. And I feel like Plante's election the first time was the city's way of saying that public opinion on the subject has changed. And so people who were championing, important causes that we're seeing the results of, if not necessarily here in Canada, but certainly across the border in the States, is that we want progressive mayors who champion diversity, who want climate change. Who
want to stop climate change.
Who want to actively fight climate change.
Yeah.
And those people who I spoke to who were happy about Plante's re-election felt that she was the only candidate who was very strong on this issue.
Well, I find that there was another candidate who was very strong on issues, but not very strong on ground game, and that was Balarama Holness. I think that he was.
I agree completely.
I like his policies. I think he might have actually been a pretty decent mayor, but the thing is, he was not going to win, and with the risk of Coderre there, it was too great for a lot of people. And I think that
I actually voted for Balarama Holness because I thought that a lot of his policies were even more progressive than Plant's.
Yeah.
And certainly on the issues of diversity, for example, the fact that he got a lot of death threats straight away, or just due to the color of his skin, this go back to your country nonsense, which even I've heard from time to time, and I was born and raised here.
Yeah.
And well, and I think what really shot, but he addressed it head on by saying he reported it to the police, that he wasn't going to take this sort of thing sitting down. And that was a very good message to send to the people of Montreal when, we are the most ethnically and culturally diverse city in Quebec. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I feel like I have to stress this for any diehards who might end up watching. But I agree with you that his ground game wasn't necessarily good.
No, I've seen Projet Montréal's get out the vote operate. I've seen Projet Montréal's get out.
Biggest borough in Montreal, for example.
Yeah.
You didn't really see them. You saw more from that independent guy who was running, Thibodeau, I think his name was.
Well, there was one guy who was running. I made fun of this on the last FTB Fridays, which you weren't on. Basically, he had a picture of the Olympic Stadium woven into his logo, but that was another independent guy.
I don't think it was him. He had a green background. Anyway.
Yeah. But no, yeah, but the thing, yeah, ground games importantly, the thing is Holness, like it's, I mean, if you've ever seen Projet Montréal's, like how they run a campaign, like their get out the vote campaign is really strong. And I imagine Coderre's their movements is just as good, but Balarama, he's a great candidate, but his party really didn't have, like, I think 4 years off might be a reforming. And if he sticks around for the next 4 years, he actually might be a stronger force because he spends 4 years developing roots in the different communities and working on the ground game. He might be a lot stronger in 4 years.
That may be, if municipal politics is what he ultimately wants to end up in.
Yeah, but of course, the thing we all want to talk about, or at least you do, is NDG Côte-des-Neiges, which was the biggest, most interesting part of the election.
Sorry, I hate to use the word ground zero, but that was a particularly tough ride because the thing, I got to interview Sue Montgomery a while back, and one of the things, back when she was running the first time actually, and one of the things she said is, we're the biggest borough, and I think we can be the best borough, but we're not treated as such by City Hall. And I think what turned the public against Sue Montgomery was the whole scandal between her and Valérie Plante that ultimately led to her expulsion from Valérie Plante's caucus and her going forward, calling her party Courage Montreal, which is funny. Apparently somebody tried to sue them early on about the name, and
that was a group of NDP or people not affiliated with the NDP, but who support the NDP or support progressive causes in general. I think. I don't know if they're the ones who tried to sue, but
Sue Montgomery's causes were quite progressive. She did a lot of events where she was willing to meet constituents and listen to their concerns. But I think what really did her in, as I said, was that whole scandal with Valérie Plante that culminated in a legal decision. So it wasn't necessarily that people disliked Sue Montgomery or any of her candidates. It's more that they were fed up with all the drama and they felt like it was a waste of their tax dollars.
Yeah. Well, an interesting statistic, because first of all, the borough mayor actually, the one who won last minute was Grazia Katawa from Projet Montréal, the first Black woman to be a mayor in Montreal, a borough mayor in Montreal, and she won.
Excellent, but it was a very tight race.
Lionel Perez, the Coderre's candidate, was officially declared by the media the winner the night before, but then the next day, Kazoki Katawa won by I think 83 votes.
Yeah, it was a tiny margin, and I think it was, as much as I admire Grazia, what's her last name?
Kazoki Katawa?
Kazoki Katawa. Yeah, I'm terrible with names, and I apologize for this. But I don't necessarily think that it was a total win for her so much as a big loss for Perez, because Perez, for the most part, is very well liked in the borough. And why? Because he stood up to Valérie Plante on the issue of Bill 21 and therefore became the champion of religious minorities in NDG Côte-des-Neiges, which, as you know, has many. We have a lot of Muslims, we have a lot of religious Jews, We had
Yeah.
a lot of not so religious Jews, but who still opposed the implementation of Bill 21. And he was the one who went in front of Valerie Plante and said, "Are you nuts? Do you realize what city this is?"
Yeah.
I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but that's more or less how he went about it.
I do think Plante's opposition could have been stronger, but this is not a bill that Plante necessarily supports. But it's a provincial bill. Her argument was more like it's the provincial government telling me what to do. Like,
and we got to do it. But my stance has and always will be: history doesn't remember people, does not remember leaders who say, "Oh, this law sucks, but I'm going to go with it anyway."
Yeah, but if you look at the numbers, back to NDG, if you look at the numbers,
history remembers people for those who stand up and say, "No, we're not taking this."
Yeah, but just back to the numbers for NDG for a while. If you look at I looked at this, the numbers of that Sue Montgomery got, roughly 2,000 votes for borough mayor. And she finished actually in fourth. The numbers that Kasoki Katawa got, if you add those together, it's roughly the numbers that Valerie Plante got in the borough votes for mayor of Montreal. So what it tells me is like about 2,000 people who voted for Plante decided to vote Montgomery at the borough mayor level. And if those 83 people had stayed home, Montgomery might have been the spoiler for Perez.
I was actually one of the ones who voted for Montgomery because,
But you voted for wholeness for city mayor, you said.
Yes, I did. But I voted for Montgomery for borough mayor.
Okay.
And the reason is very simple. And I fully admit my bias here, but I actually read the legal decision against Valerie Plante regarding Sue Montgomery. And because I was familiar with how severely Sue Montgomery and her staff were wronged in that legal decision, and that people couldn't look past the scandal itself, not necessarily who won or who lost, but just the big drama itself.
Like, why are you spending time on this?
What?
Like, why are you spending time on this sort of way?
Why are you spending time? Why are you spending money with this? Bothered me because I felt Montgomery was, for the most part, a competent leader, and she did her best dealing with, a broader city hall that didn't want to deal with her.
Well, now, one thing is interesting is now we actually have at least an NDG, and one thing I've noticed with the project is their incumbency rate is staggeringly good. We now have the exact same.
Everybody wants McLean's seat was secure.
Well, McLean is not. He's a whole other story unto himself. But McLean, Magda Papaioannou, they retook Loyola, which was originally won by Christian Arsenault. Now, they won it again with a different candidate and borough mayor. So they have the exact same control of Côte-des-Neiges. Yeah. So
have to drop out for health reasons.
Yeah. So it looks like for the next 4 years, we're going to get to see what would happen if the plan. We're going to get to see the Valerie Plante's plan continue, and hopefully it gets better. One thing is on the Quebec front, the Quebec government's been going back and forth with the nurses, right?
Oh yeah. And I have a unique perspective on this because I know it's cliche given that I'm Filipino and all, but basically all the women in my family of the previous generation are nurses. They immigrated during the wave when there was calls for immigration to target specific labor needs, in this case nurses. And what's become very clear, at least from everything I've read, is that the government solution is simply to offer more money without making any structural changes to the way nurses are being scheduled in the public system. Because the problem is the private sector, where, I don't know, you can hire a private nurse through one of these tons of agencies in Montreal to watch your sick mother so she doesn't have to be schlepped off to a home, especially given how dreadfully, the homes have been reviewed recently.
Yeah.
That you can hire, whatever, and the hourly rate you're going to get, your pay is going to be so much higher. But more importantly, and this is something that seems to be completely lost on the Quebec government, more importantly, they have a lot more say in their hours. The hours are a lot more flexible, so they can get the work-life balance that is so important to people of our generation. So, the government says, okay, well, we'll offer you this much more money, whatever. And I remember, talking to a nurse I know and him saying that the initial offer for a raise over X number of years was kind of insulting. But if you look at the representatives of nurses, if you look at the representatives of the nurses union, if you look at interviews with people who chose to either leave the profession outright or who either chose to leave the profession outright or go into the private sector, the consensus is that they were working days where they would get 4 or 5 days of, or something like that, mandatory overtime with no rest at all.
Oh, man.
And when you're working, for example, in a hospital setting where everything is fast, and you're running on low sleep and the anxiety, because the thing I've learned from my family of nurses is that, first off, they deserve the highest respect of anybody in the hospital, above the doctors, whatever, because they take crap from patients, they take it from doctors, they take it from nurses' aides, and they take it from administrators, and all the other adjacent people. They take it from everyone, and they work the hardest, and they often have to go above and beyond what their mandate is at their job. Yeah. So, and I fully acknowledge my bias here, but we should be licking their boots, okay? But having said that, the government solution is to offer them a little bit more pay, to push more nurses more nursing students who aren't necessarily ready to start their stages, their experience in the field yet in. And I've seen entire classes of them, go through the hospital, basically being debriefed on what to do with their little tags indicating that they're students. And to actually enact legal disincentives to them joining the private sector, when the nurses keep saying that's not the answer. Would you listen already?
Yeah. Well, the government's also sort of doing something similar with family doctors. I heard this. They've been trying to force family doctors to instead of hiring new ones, they're forcing the existing ones to take on more patients, and the local government's fighting with the family doctors to the point where some people can't even get a family doctor.
And it's a very dangerous move. I understand it can take a long time to get a family doctor. I have friends who have been on the online public waiting list for, going on 3 years, and they still don't have a family doctor. I was very lucky. I got one in a few months, but only because when I signed up, I was literally a few days out of surgery. Okay. And I had a bunch of, chronic, or I guess what the Americans would call pre-existing conditions.
Yeah.
But I know people have been waiting a long time to get family doctors. And the thing is, Quebec and Canada in general is already facing a massive brain drain, because just getting into medical school, first off, is extremely difficult, extremely expensive, etc. And then you get into a system that's trying to force you to work harder. And I think that that's going to result in two things. One, you're going to see an increase in the brain drain, more people going to the States because, hey, I can charge a fortune for just, sending somebody to get a cast on their leg. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You're going to see that, but you're also going to see a decline in patient care, in the quality of patient care. And I can tell you this as somebody with multiple chronic illnesses, you do not want a doctor that is in a hurry looking at you when you are very concerned about a particular health issue. You don't want a doctor walking in and acting like a livestock auctioneer, because it means that they are going to pick the quickest and most obvious diagnosis rather than taking the time to find the correct one.
Yeah. So I guess, but I guess, they're. I mean, it's weird. I definitely believe that. For example, like healthcare is I'm strong as any Canadian believe the healthcare is a right, but I think that we really need to make the system work better and hire more people, even if it costs more money to the government. I'd say hire more people, get the work done, pay them properly, but at the same point to keep it free for everyone. So,
well, I would also argue that one of the things we need to do is set certain standards with regards to healthcare. And when I say certain standards, after what happened to Joyce Echequan and that Filipino lady at the lakeshore, bias training should be mandatory in medical schools, period. And I say this as a woman of color who, if I go into the hospital, because I'm frequently mistaken for this or that ethnicity, it's assumed I'm drug seeking. You know, people of a certain age or a certain look, it's assumed that they're there for a substance abuse issue and not a physical health one. Okay, not to mention all the abuse. So it's not just about paying them right, making sure that, you know, the doctor to patient ratios are correct, incentivizing them to come here, but mandatory bias training should be a big part of it. And whether or not you get your license to practice should be contingent on it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess on that note, that's it for today for FTB Fridays. People can follow you at Sam Art. Go through your
Facebook.com. Well, you can follow me on Instagram at SamIamArtistMTL, or you can check out my Facebook page at Facebook.com/SamIamArt.
You can follow me on Twitter at Jason C. McLean, Instagram as well too. You can follow Forget the Box on Facebook, like and share this video. On YouTube, smash that like button. Follow us on YouTube. Follow Forget the Box at Forget the Box on Twitter. Get our app for Android. The iOS one still coming soon. And for daily content, you can always check out forgetthebox.net, and we'll join you next week for another FTB Fridays.